Immigration has been a cornerstone of the United States since its founding. From the early waves of European settlers to the diverse populations arriving from Asia, Latin America, and Africa, immigration has played an essential role in shaping America's culture, economy, innovation, and global influence. But what if one day the United States decided to shut its doors to immigrants entirely? What if the borders were sealed, visas suspended, green cards halted, and no new immigrants, temporary or permanent, were allowed to enter? While it may sound like a hypothetical scenario, the consequences of such a decision would ripple across nearly every facet of American life, both immediately and for generations to come. To begin understanding the impact, one must first acknowledge the sheer scale of immigration's current influence. As of the mid-2020s, immigrants make up nearly 14% of the total U.S. population, while their children account for even more. Immigrants fuel vital sectors of the economy, ranging from agriculture and construction to high-tech industries and healthcare. If immigration were stopped overnight, the U.S. would face a seismic demographic and economic shift, triggering consequences many fail to anticipate. The immediate effect of halting immigration would be felt in the labor market. Sectors like agriculture, hospitality, home health care, and food services rely heavily on immigrant workers. Many of these jobs are ones that native-born Americans either do not seek or are unwilling to perform under the conditions provided. Without a steady stream of immigrant labor, farms would struggle to harvest crops, resulting in massive losses in the agricultural sector. Prices for fruits, vegetables, and other staples could skyrocket due to shortages in supply. Restaurants, hotels, and nursing homes would be forced to cut services, close down, or significantly raise prices. Labor shortages would not be confined to low-wage sectors. High-skill areas like technology and medicine would also suffer. Immigrants make up a significant share of engineers, IT professionals, and physicians, particularly in rural areas already suffering from doctor shortages. Without new talent entering the pipeline, these fields would stagnate and ultimately decline. Over time, the economic repercussions would compound. The U.S. economy has long relied on population growth to drive demand and productivity. Immigration not only supplies labor but also increases the number of consumers, homeowners, and entrepreneurs. Immigrants are more likely to start businesses than native-born citizens. Removing that dynamic would result in fewer startups, less innovation, and a general slowdown in economic vitality. In the long term, GDP growth would decline sharply. Fewer people would mean lower demand for goods and services. Housing markets, particularly in fast-growing cities, could collapse as demand dwindles. This would also affect state and local governments, which depend on property taxes and sales taxes to fund public services. Beyond economics, stopping immigration would accelerate America's aging problem. With declining birth rates among native-born citizens, immigration has been one of the key factors keeping the U.S. population relatively young compared to other developed countries. Without new immigrants and their children, the U.S. would face a rapidly aging population. A larger share of Americans would retire, drawing on Social Security and Medicare, while fewer working-age people would remain to support them through taxes. The fiscal imbalance would be unsustainable. To preserve these social programs, either taxes would need to rise dramatically, benefits would have to be slashed, or the programs could collapse altogether. Healthcare systems would be overwhelmed by the needs of an aging population, just as the number of healthcare professionals declines due to fewer foreign-trained doctors and nurses entering the country. The cultural ramifications of halting immigration would also be profound. The United States has always been a melting pot of cultures, traditions, languages, and ideas. Without new immigrants bringing their perspectives, values, and creativity, the cultural landscape could stagnate. The diversity that fuels American art, cuisine, music, and innovation would begin to fade. Cities once known for their multicultural vibrancy might lose their global appeal. The exchange of ideas and the celebration of different heritages, hallmarks of American society, would diminish. Internationally, the decision to stop immigration would reshape America's global image. The U.S. has long been seen as a beacon of hope and opportunity, attracting the best and brightest from around the world. Halting immigration would signal a dramatic shift in values, potentially damaging diplomatic relationships with allies and trade partners. Countries whose citizens once aspired to the American dream would turn elsewhere, perhaps to Canada, the UK, or emerging economies like India and China. America's soft power would erode, and its influence in global affairs could diminish. This would be particularly dangerous in an era where geopolitical competition is intensifying and countries are vying for global leadership in technology, education, and innovation. National security could also be compromised. While immigration is sometimes wrongly blamed for security risks, the reality is that a robust and well-managed immigration system can enhance national security. It allows the government to vet entrants, track entries and exits, and promote loyalty among new Americans. If immigration channels were shut down entirely, it might drive more people to attempt entry illegally, overwhelming border enforcement and making the system more chaotic and dangerous. Moreover, many immigrants serve in the U.S. military, especially in roles that are hard to fill. Without them, recruitment would become more difficult, weakening military readiness. From an educational standpoint, many of the nation's top universities would suffer. Foreign students account for a significant portion of tuition revenue and research output at institutions like MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. These students often remain in the U.S. after graduation, contributing to cutting-edge research and startup ecosystems. If immigration ends, the talent pool would shrink, and universities might lose funding, prestige, and their competitive edge. This would in turn slow down innovation, which could weaken the U.S. position in the global knowledge economy. Stopping immigration would also fuel political and social tensions. Immigrant communities already living in the U.S. would feel marginalized or even threatened. Families would be separated indefinitely, and people on temporary visas would find themselves in limbo. Anti-immigrant sentiments might rise, leading to increased polarization, protests, and even violence. The nation's long-standing identity as a land of immigrants would be thrown into crisis. At the same time, restricting immigration could embolden other countries to adopt similar isolationist policies, weakening international cooperation on everything from climate change to humanitarian crises. The global movement of people, ideas, and cultures would be curtailed, leading to a more fragmented and divided world. Another often overlooked consequence is the impact on innovation and technology. Immigrants have played a crucial role in America's most successful tech companies. Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, Sergey Brin, Google, and Satya Nadella, Microsoft's CEO, are all either immigrants or children of immigrants. Stopping immigration would dry up this stream of visionary leadership. The U.S. would lose its edge in artificial intelligence, biotech, quantum computing, and other frontier fields. Competitor nations would gain ground, perhaps even surpassing the U.S. in global technological leadership. This would have a direct impact on the economy, national defense, and America's future as a superpower. Environmental consequences, too, must be considered. Some argue that limiting immigration could reduce population-related stress on the environment. However, this assumes that population alone is the key driver of environmental harm, when in fact, consumption patterns and environmental policies play a much bigger role. Moreover, many immigrants bring with them a lower carbon footprint and values rooted in sustainability. Preventing immigration might delay the spread of green practices and technologies across communities that are otherwise slow to adopt them. On the flip side, without immigration, the U.S. population could decline, potentially leading to urban decay, shrinking tax bases, and infrastructure that falls into disrepair. Psychologically, the American dream would suffer a major blow. For generations, America's greatness was defined by its openness to those willing to work hard, contribute, and build a better life. If immigration were stopped, the dream would die for millions abroad and lose its luster domestically. Citizens might become more insular, fearful of outsiders and distrustful of change. This would clash with the spirit of innovation and openness that has long characterized American life. In examining this scenario, it's important to consider the motivations behind stopping immigration. Some argue that it would protect American jobs or preserve national culture, But such arguments often ignore the long-term costs and the data that show immigrants contribute more than they take. Studies consistently find that immigrants create jobs, boost innovation, and raise overall wages. Cutting off immigration might provide short-term political gains for some, but it would deal a devastating long-term blow to the nation's prosperity and cohesion. In conclusion, if the U.S. were to stop immigration from other countries entirely, the consequences would be far-reaching and devastating. The economy would contract, labor shortages would intensify, innovation would slow, and global influence would wane. America would become older, poorer, and more isolated. Its culture would lose vibrancy, its cities would lose vitality, and its global standing would suffer. Immigration has never been without challenges, but its benefits are undeniable. It has been and continues to be the lifeblood of American progress. To shut that down would not only defy history, it would endanger the very future of the United States.